Boards often talk about who sits in the room, but is that really the point? Today, we're asking a tougher question. Not how many seats you have, but what capabilities you actually need. My first guest, Jeffrey Perry, Director of Fortune Brands Innovations and Master Brand Incorporated, argues that oversized, expertise-heavy boards can quietly become slower, more bureaucratic, and less equipped for what's coming, from AI to cyber threats and geopolitical shocks. So what does a board built for 5 years from now actually look like? And how do you know when yours has crossed the line from healthy diversity of thought to dead weight? Jeffrey, many boards spend considerable time discussing board composition, but you argue that composition is ultimately more important than size. What are the most common mistakes boards make when they focus on filling seats instead of building the capabilities the company will need 5 years from now?
Yeah, one of the things that I see really fundamentally get back to the fact that it's important to have a skills matrix that most boards benefit from using. So with that as a backdrop, one of the things that I've seen related to just filling seats come down to really fundamentally replacing board seats with like for like. Say, for example, someone leaves the board that has a certain profile, and then the desire is to fill that same profile going forward. While that may be okay, that may not be the skill that is actually needed going forward. So one mistake is just filling like for like, as opposed to really just taking a step back and thinking about what's actually needed at that particular point in time. Another mistake that people make is making board decisions when it's based on urgency. So let's say, for example, there is an activist challenge or some other urgent situation where a board seat needs to be filled very quickly. And often there's just a focus on responding to a certain challenge or request, as opposed to, again, proactively thinking about what are the skills that are needed in the future in terms of filling that seat going forward. Another mistake that that's often made is what I call the resume trap. And that's when a seat is filled basically just based on the prestige of a person coming onto the board or the notoriety of someone coming onto the board, without necessarily thinking about, again, the skills that are needed going forward. Now, that person may have the skills, but sometimes it gets trumped by the prestige or the status of that particular director. And the final mistake that I see is something that I would call the relationship trap. Now, we know that a lot of board seats are filled through networks, and that's fine. And only certain board seats are filled through executive search. But when board seats are filled primarily from a relationship perspective, it's easy to overlook what are the actual skill sets that are needed. And let's, as opposed to that, just thinking more about the relationships that are being fulfilled in terms of filling those seats. So those are like 4 areas that I see as common mistakes, but they all get exposed when you are overlooking the fundamental skills matrix that I think create significant value from a board governance perspective.
You suggest that many boards continue to over-index on traditional expertise while under-indexing on disruptive technologies and emerging risks. As AI and cybersecurity reshape the business landscape, what experiences or perspectives do you believe boards most urgently need to add today?
Yeah, well, definitely. It's hard to generalize, and it depends on the industry, and it depends on the board, and it depends on the circumstance. But in general, I would say it is important for most companies to have that digital competency on their boards. Certainly, from an AI perspective, that's really important, as well as skills that are focused on disruption and change and being able to bring that skill set onto the board. And so director candidates that are able to demonstrate that add tremendous value to boards. I do think, though, there is a watch out from an overall nomination process perspective. And that is, if you bring someone onto a board that has specific expertise, which is needed, that's fine and that's valuable. But it's also really important for those directors to function as full directors and not just directors that are limited to that area of expertise. And that has a benefit for the full board, but it also serves the individual director well as well, because you would not want someone to just be limited in terms of what that they can contribute while everyone else participates as a full director. So what I mean by a full director is, in addition to their area of expertise, are they also asking the broader questions? Are they also participating in other discussions outside of their domain of expertise so that they are recognized and participating as full board directors? So while those areas such as digital, AI, disruption are really important in terms of bringing those skills onto the board, it is also important for those candidates to function as full directors, really like all other directors. And one other thing that I would add to that is that it highlights really for all directors to be focused on board education, because no one is an expert in everything, but the most successful directors are able to learn about areas that may be outside of their expertise so that they can participate in broader discussions and, again, function as full governance members across a wide range of topics.
You said that oversized boards can become burdened by bureaucracy and slow decision making. How can directors tell when a board has crossed the line from healthy diversity of thought to a structure that is actually hindering effective governance?
Yeah, there are a few warning signs to pay attention to. One is if you see that meetings are actually running long, but without deeper insight. So you can have long board meetings that have discussions that go on and on and on, but in those extended discussions, if there are no additional insights that are being unearthed, that's a sign that the size may be too large, or the bureaucracy just may be out of control. And you may also see that decisions get diluted or may be delayed because you simply just may have too many voices in the room. Because you actually do want constructive conflict, you want debate, and you want dialogue, but you want it to be a phase. You don't want it to be a lifestyle. So you want to have periods when you're having board discussions where you have an exploration phase, but then you also have a decision phase and an execution phase. And so you don't want to live in just the discussion phase for an extended period of time that keeps you from being able to actually make decisions. Another warning sign is when boards are faced with a crisis or faced when they need to make quick decisions, but they find that they're unable to make quick decisions because they just have too many voices and too much of a bureaucracy, and decisions actually get slowed down. And it actually reveals a dysfunction when everyone knows that decisions need to be made in a timely fashion, but they're simply unable to do so because they just don't have the agility in order to make quick decisions. And then the final thing that I would say is that another telltale sign of when a board is too large is when you actually have uneven participation of board directors. So think about it. If you have a right-sized board, you tend to have even participation of board directors because there's really nowhere for the board directors to hide, and everyone needs to participate in just about every discussion. when you have a board that's too large, it's very possible to have some directors participate very frequently, but it's easy for other directors to kind of just sit back and not participate because they're just other voices that can carry the day, if you will. So if you see that uneven participation, that's another telltale sign that the board actually itself may be a bit too large.
Many boards know they need refreshment, but few enjoy having those conversations. What does an effective board succession process look like? And how can directors address skills gaps and performance issues without creating unnecessary disruption in the boardroom?
Well, I know I may sound like a broken record, but all roads do lead back to that skills matrix that I mentioned earlier. So if you have a skills matrix, it's very important. And it also supports just being very transparent in terms of what the board needs going forward. And that skills matrix is a living document because it evolves over time based on what's needed. So if you start with that and you start with that transparency, that plants the seed around what are the needs of the board going forward, and how do the directors serve the needs of the business going forward. So that's really important. And so if you do that, you're actually normalizing the conversations about what the needs are. The next thing that's really important is to have a culture that is focused on board evaluations and board performance. And that can take the place, that can show up in terms of how do you actually do annual board evaluations. So for example, on one of the boards that I serve on, not only do we do annual evaluations of the overall board and the board committees, and also get input from management in terms of the board performance, but we also have individual board director performance evaluated, a third of the board each year. So each director on a rotating basis actually gets individual feedback on a regular basis as well. And so that gives individuals insight in terms of their own performance as well. And so if you have that culture of evaluation, you have the culture of evaluating what's needed for the company going forward, it takes the sting away of am I being evaluated, and puts the focus more on what does this business need going forward, and how do I fit in to the needs of the business going forward. And it just creates a different conversation that is far more constructive and far more productive.